Once upon a time, in a busy city filled with towering buildings and the hum of restless lives, people whispered about a strange village, a place where women never grew old, a village that was not on any map. Idris, a journalist who loved mysteries and the thrill of the unknown, heard the story. He asked old people about Luesa. Their faces turned serious. Their voices dropped to whispers. Their hands clutched at charms and amulets. Forget it, they warned. Some places should stay lost. But Idris didn't listen. He wanted the truth. He searched books, old newspapers, and forgotten stories in dimly lit libraries and archives coated with dust. He found nothing, no records, no proof, just missing people, those who had searched for Louisa before him. Some articles hinted at strange disappearances, reports of travelers who went looking for Louisa but were never seen again. Their names were footnotes in history, their fates lost to time. Then he met an old man named Obi in a dark, quiet room filled with the scent of burning wood and the weight of unspoken truths. Idris asked about Louisa. Obi stared at him for a long time, his lips pressed together as if sealing away a secret too dangerous to reveal. Then he whispered, Louisa is real, but some truths should stay buried, a warning Idris ignored. With an old map and scattered clues, he set off. The road stretched far, winding past villages with thatched roofs and small market stalls before disappearing into dirt trails covered with fog. Villagers along the way refused to speak about Louisa. Some looked away, some whispered prayers under their breath, some shut their doors with a finality that sent a shiver down his spine. Idris didn't stop. Days passed. His feet hurt, his food ran low. The path became harder. His body ached, his clothes clung to his skin, soaked in sweat, yet he kept going. The sun rose and fell, the trees whispered in the wind, and the nights grew colder. One night, by a campfire, an old traveler with a face carved by time spoke. Turn back, he said, his voice like dry leaves rustling. No one returns from Louisa. Idris gripped his notebook. He had come too far. Then he saw it. A thick mist rolled over the land, moving like a slow wave, curling through the trees like grasping fingers. It was unlike any fog he had ever seen. The air buzzed with something unseen, something that made his skin crawl. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. The silence was too perfect, too absolute, as if the world held its breath. Idris stepped forward. The fog lifted, and there it was, Louisa, a perfect village, streets filled with happy voices, markets bursting with fruit, children playing, women laughing. The scent of fresh bread and ripe mangoes hung in the air. Warm smiles greeted him. Women walked with grace, their skin smooth, their eyes bright. Not a single wrinkle, not a single gray hair. Idris frowned. They all looked the same age, 20, maybe 25. Their beauty was unnatural, untouched by the wear of life. He asked their ages. They only smiled. Their eyes flickered for a moment, just a brief second, but he saw it, hesitation. Then he saw the men. Bent backs, wrinkled faces, hollow eyes. They didn't smile. They didn't speak. They only watched. Their clothes hung loose on their frail bodies, their hands marked with veins like old riverbeds. The contrast was clear. The women glowed with youth. The men carried the weight of time. A feast began in Idris's honor. Plates were filled with steaming dishes. Drinks were poured into carved wooden cups. Laughter echoed like a melody in the night. The women danced and clapped, their feet light against the earth. But the men sat still, their hands resting in their laps, their faces empty, their eyes shadowed with something close to sorrow. Idris watched closely. Something wasn't right. The food was rich, the drink sweet, but he had lost his appetite. His skin tingled. Every time he looked up, he caught one of the men staring at him. Their eyes held something strange, something close to fear. Then a hand grabbed his wrist. An old man leaned close, his breath shaky, his fingers trembling as they dug into Idris's arm. His eyes, clouded with age, held urgency, desperation. Leave before the well takes you. Idris's heart pounded. He turned to ask more, but the man was gone, vanished into the crowd as if he had never been there at all. The night stretched longer. The laughter sounded hollow. The smiles felt forced. The warmth felt cold. Shadows stretched too far, and the air carried whispers that didn't belong to the wind. Louisa was not what it seemed. The perfection felt wrong. Something was being hidden, and deep inside, Idris knew he was not supposed to be here. He walked through the village, taking in every detail. The sun cast a golden glow on the streets. Laughter rang through the air. The women of Louisa moved gracefully, their faces untouched by time. Not a single wrinkle, not a single wrinkle, not a single gray hair. Each woman looked no older than 25, their beauty effortless, their skin flawless, their hands soft and unmarked by labor. He spoke to them, asked about their lives, their families, their history. They smiled warmly, their voices soft and musical, their laughter light as air. But when he asked about their ages, the smiles lingered too long, frozen in place. Their eyes flickered, just for a moment, just enough to reveal something unspoken, something hidden beneath the charm of their perfect faces. One woman laughed lightly. "Age doesn't matter here," she said, her fingers idly tracing the rim of a delicate cup. Another touched her smooth cheek, her eyes unreadable. "Time is kind to us." But Idris saw the way their fingers twitched, how their gazes shifted ever so slightly. They weren't answering. They were hiding something. Then he saw the men. They were nothing like the women. Bent backs, deep wrinkles, skin that had lost its strength, their eyes hollow, their movements slow, almost mechanical. They sat on wooden stools outside their homes, barely speaking, their hands resting limply in their laps. They watched the women move with effortless energy, but they did not join them. Idris approached one of the older men, offering a polite nod. The man returned the gesture, but did not smile. His hands trembled slightly as he raised a cup to his lips, the liquid inside dark as ink. His voice, when he spoke, was hoarse, worn by time and silence. "You're a guest. Enjoy the village while you can." Idris hesitated. "While I can." The old man did not answer. He moved to another. The same sunken eyes, the same silence, the same lingering fear. The contrast was clear. The women were untouched by time, glowing with vitality. But the men seemed drained of life. Something was wrong. The men did not dance. They did not laugh. They sat in the background, their hands still, their heads low. Then a cold hand gripped his wrist. He turned sharply. An elderly man, his face lined with age, stared at him with wide, desperate eyes. His clothes were worn, frayed at the edges, and his hands trembled slightly. His voice was barely a whisper. Leave before the well takes you. Idris's breath hitched. He opened his mouth to ask what he meant, but before he could speak, the man was gone, swallowed by the crowd. The laughter around him grew louder, the music faster, but now it all felt forced, like actors playing a scene for an audience that had long since left. Long after the village had gone to sleep, Idris remained awake. The words haunted him. The well takes you. He moved carefully, slipping between the shadows of the village, past empty homes and quiet streets. He followed a narrow path toward the temple, his steps silent against the dirt. Then he saw it, a staircase hidden beneath a wooden trapdoor, partially covered by loose straw and dry leaves. He descended slowly, the air turning thick and damp as he moved deeper underground. The scent of earth and something metallic hung heavy in the air. At the bottom, in the center of a vast chamber, it stood, a glowing well. Its waters shimmered, casting eerie reflections on the walls around it. Carvings of screaming men twisted in agony, their bodies stretched as if being pulled into the depths. Above them, a single name was etched into stone, Joko. The well pulsed as if alive. Idris took a step closer, heart pounding. The air felt heavier here, pressing against his chest. He leaned in slightly, peering into the shimmering depths, and for a brief moment he thought he saw faces, distorted, pleading, beneath the surface. Then, footsteps. He turned sharply, pressing himself against the wall. Someone was coming. Idris held his breath as figures emerged from the darkness, women draped in flowing robes, their movements slow and precise. At the front stood an elderly woman, the village matriarch. They circled the well, chanting in an ancient tongue. Their voices rose and fell, a rhythm both beautiful and unsettling, like a song sung to forgotten gods. Then, one by one, they drank from the well. The water shimmered as their lips touched it, and for a brief moment their faces changed, a flicker, a shadow of something older, something ancient, before their youth returned, skin tightening, eyes brightening. Idris's stomach twisted. This was why they never aged. The well sustained them. But how? At what cost? His eyes darted to the carvings of the screaming men, the drained men of Luesa. The fear in their eyes. It wasn't just water. It was taking something from them. A life for youth, a price paid in silence. Idris's breath came shallow. He needed to leave. His foot scraped against the stone floor. The chanting stopped. A hush fell over the chamber. The matriarch turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing, sharp as blades. She had heard him. Idris's pulse roared in his ears. He could not be caught. He could not be the next prize. Idris ran, lungs burning, legs barely keeping up. Behind him, the earth trembled, the village tearing itself apart. Houses crumbled, streets cracked, the well roared with a monstrous cry. Screams filled the air. Then, silence. Dust rose like a thick curtain, swallowing everything. Then nothing. He stopped, gasping for breath, and turned. Luesa was gone. No ruins, no ashes, just an empty clearing, untouched, as if nothing had ever stood there. The laughter, the voices, the smiles, all erased. His pulse pounded. He had seen it, lived it, survived it, and yet There was nothing. Stumbling back to the city days later, he felt like a man walking through a dream. His body ached, his mind trapped in a loop of horror. He had to tell someone, had to warn them. He wrote feverishly, recounting every moment, the beautiful women, the beautiful women, the hollow-eyed men, the well that stole time. His hands trembled as he sent the story to his editor, desperate for the world to know the truth. They laughed. A vanishing village? A cursed well? Come on, Idris. You can do better than this, he argued. He swore it was real. But where was the proof? No records, no satellite images, no missing person reports. Even the elders who had once spoken of Luisa now denied it. Luisa? Never heard of it. Panic crept into his bones. How could an entire village disappear? How could every trace of it be erased? His editor shook his head, dismissed the story as fiction. Great imagination, though. Idris sat in silence. He had risked everything, barely escaped with his life. But none of it mattered. The world had already forgotten. Days turned to weeks. Idris tried to move on, but the nightmares followed, the whispers, the glow of the well, the feeling of hands grabbing him in the dark. Sleep became a luxury. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back there, bound in ropes, staring into the well, knowing he was next. But it was over. Luisa was gone, or so he thought. One evening, as he walked through Lagos's crowded streets, he froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. Across the road among the moving faces was her. Lami. She stood still, her dark eyes locked onto his. Young, flawless, unchanged. It wasn't possible. The well was gone. The village had crumbled. How could she still be here? Idris's breath came in short gasps. He had to reach her. He pushed through the crowd, calling her name, shoving past people. She turned and walked away, slipping through the mass of bodies with ease. He ran faster, dodging carts pushing through. She was just ahead. Then she vanished, his pulse pounded. He scanned the crowd, eyes darting wildly. Where did she go? His hands shook as he turned a corner, desperately searching. Then he saw her again. Only it wasn't her. A stranger stood where Lami had been, her expression confused. Are you all right? She asked. Idris stumbled back, his chest tightening. Had he imagined it, or had the curse never truly ended? A cold wind cut through the air, and a single thought consumed him. Some story should remain untold. The story of Idris and the mysterious village of Luesa reminds us that some truths are best left undiscovered. The promise of eternal youth came at a terrible price, showing that not everything that shines is gold. Curiosity can lead to danger when warnings are ignored, and the cost of knowledge can sometimes be too high. Thank you for watching my channel. Don't forget to check out more fascinating videos where stories like this come to life with valuable lessons. In a busy compound in the heart of Lagos, where the sounds of honking cars and street vendors filled the air, two women, Mama Amina and Mama Tunde, lived next to each other. Their houses were side by side, their doors always open to one another, and they were as close as family. Even though they raised their kids differently, they were best friends. Mama Amina was strict. She liked rules and order. She believed that discipline shaped character and had a firm but loving way of handling things. But Mama Tunde was calm and easygoing. She hardly ever got angry, preferring to let things flow naturally. Both women worked hard as traders, spending most of their time at the bustling market, bartering with customers under the scorching sun. This meant their kids, Amina and Tunde, were often left on their own. The two children grew up like brother and sister, their laughter echoing through the compound's narrow alleys. At 14 years old, they were always together, sharing secrets, doing homework, and playing in the compound. Their laughter filled the yard, mingling with the rhythmic clatter of cooking pots and the occasional distant sound of a generator humming in the background. One evening, while eating a steaming plate of jollof rice, Tun told his mom, "Mama, I need a phone. All my classmates have one. I feel left out." Mama Tunde stopped eating, her spoon hovering midair. "A phone, Tund? Don't you think you're too young for that?" "But Mama, it's not just for games. I can use it to study too," Tunde said, looking at her with big hopeful eyes. Mama Tunde sighed, adjusting her wrapper. She wasn't sure if he was ready for a phone, but then she had an idea. "If you come first in your class this term, I'll buy you a phone. But only if you prove you deserve it." Tunde's face lit up like the bright neon lights of Lagos at night. From that day, he worked harder than ever. He spent hours studying under the dim glow of a kerosene lamp, his brows furrowed in concentration. Even Amina noticed. "You're really serious about this phone, aren't you?" she teased one evening as they worked on math together, swatting away a mosquito buzzing near her ear. "I'll show Mama I can do it," Tunde said with a confident smile, determination shining in his eyes. When the term ended, Tunde rushed home with his report card, his heart pounding with excitement. He was smiling so big, it was as if he had just won a trophy. "Mama, look, first position," he said proudly. Mama Tunde was so happy she clapped her hands together, laughing with joy. She hugged him tight and said, "I'm proud of you. I'll keep my promise." And she did. She bought him a shiny new iPhone, its smooth screen gleaming under the fluorescent light. It was better than Tunde had ever imagined. He was so excited that he could hardly sleep that night. The phone quickly became Tunde's favorite thing. He played games, watched cartoons, and explored the internet. Amina often joined him, and they spent hours lying on the cool cement floor, laughing at funny videos and sharing games. One sunny afternoon, while the scent of frying plantains drifted through the compound, Tunde and Amina were playing with the phone in his room. "Let's see what else we can find," Tunde said, scrolling through apps. "Yeah," Amina replied, her eyes sparkling with curiosity as she rested her chin in her hands. The phone seemed to have endless possibilities, a whole new world beyond their small compound. Tunde and Amina's innocent curiosity led them to places they didn't fully understand. Their exploration was about to take a turn they couldn't have predicted. One quiet afternoon, while their mothers were at the market, the usual chatter of the compound replaced by distant voices, Tunde and Amina sat in his room as usual. Tunde was scrolling through his phone, flipping through apps and videos. Amina sat beside him, absently braiding a loose thread from her dress. Suddenly, Tunde stopped. "What's this?" he asked, tapping on an icon he hadn't seen before. The screen was filled with thumbnails of videos that looked different from the usual cartoons and games they enjoyed. Curious, Tunde clicked on one. The video began to play, showing adults acting in ways the kids didn't understand. Amina leaned closer, her face scrunched in confusion. "What are they doing?" she whispered, glancing at Tunde. I think it's something adults do, Tunde said slowly. I've heard older boys at school talk about stuff like this. Amina's cheeks turned red. Should we be watching this? It feels just wrong. It's just a video, Tunde said, though his voice wavered. We're not doing anything bad, but both of them felt uneasy. The video ended, but instead of stopping, Tunde clicked on another. The strangeness of the videos fascinated them, even though they didn't fully understand what they were seeing. Let's not tell anyone about this, Tunde said finally. It's our secret. Amina hesitated but nodded. A part of her wanted to tell her mother, but she knew how strict Mama Amina was. She didn't want to risk the punishment. After that, things changed. When the mothers went to the market, Tunde and Amina locked themselves in his room to watch more of the strange videos. The laughter that used to fill the compound was replaced with chirped whispers and sneaky glances. Weeks passed, and their secrets started to affect their friendship. They stopped playing outside and doing homework together. Everything now revolved around the videos. One day, Amina broke the silence. Do you think it's bad that we're watching these videos? She asked softly, tracing patterns on the dusty windowsill. Tunde looked uncomfortable. It's just videos, Amina. We're not doing anything wrong. But what if Mama finds out? Amina asked, her voice shaking. She won't, Tunde said firmly. We just have to keep it a secret. Amina nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then one day, she said something that shocked Tunde. What if we try doing what they're doing in the videos? Tunde froze. What? No, that's not a good idea, Amina. Why not? Amina asked, tilting her head. If adults do it, maybe we'll understand it better. Tunde shook his head. I don't think it's right. What if we get caught? But Amina wouldn't let it go. Her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She kept asking until Tunde finally gave in. The first time they tried, it didn't go well. Amina felt a sharp pain and told Tunde to stop. She ran out of the room, crying. For days, she avoided him, refusing to talk or even look at him. Tunde felt terrible. He didn't know how to make it right. He spent sleepless nights thinking about it, replaying the moment in his head. Finally, at school, he found her and said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have agreed. Amina hesitated, her fingers gripping the straps of her school bag, but then nodded. It's okay. Let's just forget about it. They started talking again, but their friendship wasn't the same. Their conversations felt forced, and the easy laughter they once shared was missing. Then, one day, Amina surprised him. I think we should try again, she said bluntly, her tone firm. Tunde stared at her, his stomach tightening. What? No, Amina. This time will be different. Amina interrupted, her eyes unwavering. Please, Tunde, don't disappoint me. Tunde's heart sank. He didn't want to say yes, but he also didn't want to upset Amina. So he agreed, even though every part of him told him not to. One day after school, Tunde and Amina stayed behind in an empty classroom. The school was quiet. Most of the students and teachers had already gone home. The only sounds came from the occasional birds outside and the creaking of the ceiling fan. Amina looked at Tunde with determination. Are you sure about this? Tunde whispered nervously, looking around, as in, we be quick. No one will know. They snuck into the school toilet, their hearts pounding with fear and excitement. Just as they were about to try what they had seen in the videos, they heard footsteps in the hallway. "Someone's coming," Tunde hissed, grabbing Amina's arm. They panicked and ran out, going in different directions, their backpacks slamming against their backs as they sprinted. It was the school security guard making his usual rounds. Luckily, he didn't see them, but the close call left them shaken and breathless. That evening, when their mothers were still at work, Amina turned to Tunde. "We have to try again." This time at home. Tunde hesitated, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "I don't know, Amina. What if someone catches us?" "No one's here," Amina insisted, lowering her voice. "Our moms won't be back for hours." Reluctantly, Tunde agreed. They went into his room and locked the door. But before they could start, the front door opened, and the familiar clinking of keys echoed through the house. "Tunde, are you home?" Mama Tunde called out. Tunde and Amina froze. Their faces went pale as fear gripped them. Mama Tunde's footsteps got closer, and she knocked on the door. "Tunde, why is this door locked?" They scrambled to hide what they were doing, shoving the phone under a pillow. When Mama Tunde came in, her sharp eyes scanned the room. She saw their nervous faces, the way Amina clutched her hands tightly in her lap. "What's going on here?" she asked firmly, crossing her arms. Amina stared at the floor, too scared to speak. Tunde stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. But Mama Tunde wasn't convinced. Her gut told her something was wrong. "Both of you, sit down," she said. "Now tell me the truth." The children exchanged nervous glances. They knew they couldn't lie anymore. Their voices trembling, they told her everything about the videos, their curiosity, and what they had tried to do. Mama Tunde listened in shock. Her heart sank. She felt guilty. How had she not noticed this? Had she been too focused on work? Taking a deep breath, she said, "Stay here. I need to talk to Mama Amina." She went to Amina's house and told her everything, her voice heavy with concern. Mama Amina was stunned. Her face went pale, and her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. "This is all Amina's fault," she said angrily. "She's leading Tunde astray." "No," Mama Tunde said firmly, shaking her head. "It's not just Amina. Both of them are involved. We need to handle this together as mothers." Mama Amina sighed. Her usual strictness softened into worry. "What do we do?" she asked quietly, rubbing her temples. "We need to talk to them," Mama Tunde said, "and we need to get them help. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes to guide them." The two mothers went back to Tunde's house. They sat the children down and explained why the videos were dangerous and why their actions were wrong. They spoke gently but firmly. They spoke gently but firmly. The children could feel their mother's disappointment, and their shame weighed heavily on them. After that day, everything changed. The air in the compound was different, more cautious, more aware. Mama Amina softened her strict ways. She spent more time with Amina, trying to build trust. Mama Tunde also changed. She started guiding Tunde more, realizing her leniency had left him without proper boundaries. Both families sought professional help. Therapy helped Tunde and Amina understand why their actions were harmful and taught them to make better choices. They slowly learned that curiosity had to be guided by wisdom. But despite the effort to fix things, The bond between the families was never the same. Mama Amina decided to move to another state, hoping to give Amina a fresh start. As the moving truck drove away, Tunde watched from the compound, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. He had learned a hard lesson, one he would never forget. Parents should spend time with their kids, talk to them about safe phone use, and teach them about the dangers of certain content. Phones can be helpful tools, but they should only be given when a child is mature enough to handle them responsibly. This story teaches us the importance of guiding and monitoring children's use of technology. Parents should actively engage with their kids, talk to them about safe online habits, and set clear boundaries to protect them from harmful content. A lack of supervision can lead to unintended consequences that may affect their emotional and psychological well being. Thank you for watching my channel. Stay tuned for more insightful and engaging stories. Don't forget to check out other exciting videos on the channel. I was only trying to help Aisha try to explain, her voice trembling. I found her in the bush. She was in pain. I didn't know what to do, but the villagers didn't listen. The more Aisha tried to explain, the angrier they got. The story changed and grew with every telling. Some said she had used the woman for a money ritual just to renew her uncle's wealth. Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by lush green fields and a sparkling river, there lived a young girl named Aisha. She was a very beautiful and clever girl. Her uncle Malam was the wealthiest farmer in the village, loved by everyone for his kind heart. When Malam passed away, Aisha, who was his niece, inherited all his wealth and his big farm. Aisha's parents had died when she was very little, so she was all alone in her big house with its high walls and grand wooden doors. But she was not lonely. She had the whole village as her family. Malam was a man who believed in sharing his blessings. He would give away half of his farm's produce to people who had less. After Malam passed away, Aisha continued doing the same. She was just like her uncle, kind and generous. Every time the farm had a harvest, she made sure the villagers got their share, especially the old men and women who couldn't work anymore. Aisha wasn't just kind by giving away food and her farm produce, she was also kind in small ways like smiling, listening to others, and helping out. Everyone in the village loved Aisha because she was different from other wealthy people. She was humble and down to earth. She didn't act like she was better than anyone else. Instead, she would spend her free time with other girls of the village, chatting and playing like she was one of them. The villagers loved her, not just because she gave them things, but because she was one of them at heart. People would often say, "Look at Aisha. She's just like her uncle Malam, so kind and giving," and Aisha would just smile and continue doing her good work. She believed that if you have the means to help, you should. Little did she know that her grandmother, who lived in a small clay hut at the edge of the village, had some wise words of caution for her words that would soon change the way she saw the world. One sunny day, Aisha went to visit her grandmother. Her grandmother was old and wise, with many stories and lessons from her long life. As they sat under a big tree outside her hut, her grandmother looked at Aisha with a serious look in her eyes. "Aisha," her grandmother said, "you are just like your uncle, always ready to help. But I must tell you something important." Aisha listened carefully as her grandmother continued. Aisha listened carefully as her grandmother continued. "It's good to be kind, but you must be careful. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend." Her grandmother then told her an old saying, "People love heroes, But what they love more than heroes is seeing the hero fall. Aisha looked puzzled, so her grandmother explained. I told the same thing to your Uncle Malam. Being too kind can sometimes bring trouble. Some people might take advantage of your kindness or even become jealous, Aisha thought about this for a moment, but she couldn't imagine anyone in her village being unkind to her. I understand, Grandma, Aisha replied, but I believe that if I can help, I should. That's what makes our village strong. We help each other. Her grandmother nodded, knowing Aisha was just as stubborn as her uncle. Just remember, not all help is good help. Sometimes, the best help is teaching others to stand on their own. Aisha hugged her grandmother, promising to be careful, but deep down, she still believed in her uncle's way to help wherever and whenever she could. Little did Aisha know her grandmother's words would soon echo in her life in a way she never expected. One evening, as Aisha was walking home through a quiet path lined with tall trees and chirping birds, she heard a cry for help coming from the bush. Her heart raced as she followed the sound and found a woman lying on the ground in pain. The woman was pregnant and it looked like her baby was coming soon. Without a second thought, Aisha rushed to help. She remembered watching the village midwives and tried to do what they did, but things were not going well. The woman was losing a lot of blood, and Aisha didn't know how to stop it. She was scared, but kept trying to help, hoping she could save both the mother and her baby. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the village, the woman's cries grew weaker, so Aisha decided to take her to the village. As Aisha tried to help the woman to the midwife's house, just as they stepped into the village in front of everybody in the village square, the woman suddenly collapsed. Aisha shouted for help, but by the time others came, the woman was not moving. Aisha felt her heart sink as the woman stopped moving. She was covered in blood, her hands shaking. She didn't know what to do. She had tried to help, but now the woman lay cold on the ground, looking like she was dead. Aisha was in shock. She had wanted to be a hero to save the day like her uncle always did, but now she stood alone in the middle of the village with her hands covered in blood and the pregnant woman not moving. The villagers, in shock and fear, started whispering. She's dead, someone said. Aisha killed her, one person whispered. That Aisha had hurt the woman, another said she was a witch. The word spread like wildfire. Aisha is a witch, they said. She brought bad luck upon the woman. Aisha couldn't believe her ears. These were the same people she had grown up with, helped and cared for. How could they think so ill of her? The villagers who had been benefactors from Aisha's uncle's farm now looked at her like she was a stranger. All of a sudden, the once generous Aisha had become dangerous in their faces. I was only trying to help, Aisha tried to explain, her voice trembling. I found her in the bush. She was in pain. I didn't know what to do, but the villagers didn't listen. The more Aisha tried to explain, the angrier they got. The story changed and grew with every telling. Some said she had used the woman for a money ritual just to renew her uncle's wealth. Others said she was cursed since no woman had died in childbirth in the village since Aisha's own birth. Aisha stood in the middle of the crowd, feeling alone and scared. She had always seen the best in her village, but now she saw something else, fear and suspicion. It was like a dark cloud had covered the sun, and the warmth she had always felt in her village was gone. She remembered her grandmother's warning and wished she had listened. As the accusations grew, the villagers decided to take Aisha to the king for judgment. Aisha walked with her head down her heart, heavy with sadness and disbelief. The kind girl who had always been a hero in the village was now being treated like a villain. This was a betrayal she never saw coming. The angry villagers dragged Aisha to the king's palace. The king, an old man with a kind face, had known Aisha since she was a child.